So moving on, I found this a very interesting article. So Bruce Willis has been one of the most prominent actors of the last 40 years, starring in a multitude of films. More, famously for his Die Hard movies, but he did movies such as Pulp Fiction and, other things, Red, And so recently, he said in the last 6 months that he had to retire because of this disease that he had, because I believe it's called aphasia, and it slurred his speech. So now, in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, we've had several movies, Rogue One being one of them, from the untimely passing of Carrie Fisher, that used AI or CGI models, of characters, even if it wasn't long periods of time. So, actually, this company in Russia was actually called Deepcake. So, I'm not too familiar with it. You may be more familiar with it. They're called deepfakes. Anyways, the long story short is they wanted to possibly use the rights to Bruce Willis' face for AI. So let me ask you this, Kyle, and we've seen this, like I said, in a couple other films. Do you like the fact, or do you like the idea of an AI character?
David, I love it. No, I'm just kidding.
So,
it is a very touchy issue because, it can have very dangerous consequences. You do not know what could happen. Like, if you think about yourself, how would you feel if, after you die, 50 years after that, you're starring in a movie alongside, some
anybody.
other actor, and you're doing said things in that movie that you would never have agreed to if you were living. It's like, it's really dangerous.
Yeah. So, it basically says only Bruce Willis has the right to Bruce Willis' face. It's widely reported last week that the star, and this comes from Deadline, it was widely reported last week that the star had sold the rights to his face to a Russian deepfake company called Deepcake, allowing the company to create a, quote, digital twin, end quote, for the actor who retired in March, following his diagnosis of aphasia, a condition affecting a person's speech. However, the BBC this weekend reported a spokeswoman for Willis denying that he had any particular partnership or agreement with the company. And Deepcake confirmed to the BBC that, quote, the wording about rights is wrong. Bruce couldn't sell anyone his rights. They are his by default, end quote. I just find it interesting that this is where we've come in technology, that you or I or Bruce Willis or Carrie Fisher or anybody else could be in a film that, let's face it, we're not in the film. But the one thing I'll say is this. Number one, if it's done tastefully, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Number two, it depends on how long said person is going to be in the film. If you look at Carrie Fisher, in that whole thing, it was just a quick split second. The Grand Moff character in Rogue One, a split second. I don't think you can duplicate that person. And number three, I think when you've been acting for 40 years, whether it's on television or movies or whatever it is, I think your legacy's all right. He's done some of the most iconic roles ever. He's done some bombs, too. Let's face it. Color of Night, Red. But the point is, though...
The last, 15 movies he made.
Yeah, but the point is, his legacy's safe. I'm not saying that they should go do a whole movie about Bruce Willis and be... No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if it's done tastefully and it's done right, I don't see a problem with it. Although I do, what you were just talking about, to your point, I do find it strange, though, that you could be past, because, this all goes back to James Earl Jones. So anybody who doesn't know, James Earl Jones in the last month basically said he was going to stop playing Darth Vader. And, Darth Vader is one of the most iconic villains of all time, next to Hannibal Lecter. So, that being said, James Earl Jones is 91. But, I don't know. What I'll say is this. It's a very slippery slope. It's a very slippery slope. Because if you do this for him, who says you couldn't do it for an actor or actress that is perfectly fine? Right? So,
yeah.
I don't know. Let me ask you this question. Would you want to see a movie that if you knew the character was, whether they were alive or dead, would you want to see a film with this, knowing that they were a CGI character?
I think it depends. Like you were saying, like with a Carrie Fisher, that was a split second, right? That was really quick, and it kind of, honestly, like it has aged poorly, like really poorly. I actually saw Rogue One in IMAX a couple of weeks ago, and it is so off. It's very weird. The movie ends like that because it ends on a CG character compared to other movies that don't. I don't know, like it is hard because the only thing that can be used for, what it's been used for most recently, is it helps when you de-age actors. So like you can have like a scene like in The Mandalorian, for instance, and in The Mandalorian they de-aged Mark Hamill to look like a younger Luke Skywalker. However, the problem with this is it takes away the roles from other actors. Let me tell you this, David. If this existed back in, the 70s, we wouldn't have Godfather Part 2 with Robert De Niro. We would have Godfather Part 2 with a de-aged Marlon Brando. And I don't like that. Like, think about the great performance that Robert De Niro gives in that movie that we would be missing out on. And that's what happens with a lot of these other movies. And a good example, too, currently right now is House of the Dragon. If they wanted to, they could have de-aged and aged up all of these actors using computer technology. But they said, no, we're going to cast other actors. And it was a brilliant decision. But, 50 years from now, we might have a situation where they just de-age everybody. So I'm more against it than I am for it, because there's actually, I think, more negatives or cons than pros when it comes to this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that when it comes to certain things, they just need to leave well enough alone. And so, what do you guys think? Do you think Bruce Willis should be a CGI character? Do you like movies that have CGI characters? Would you watch them?